It is shocking. It's incredibly sad, but there's also a sense of inevitability about this. I mean, Navalny himself had warned, well, rather, his spokesperson had warned that they thought he was being slowly killed in prison. And indeed, the fate of Kremlin critics, the lifespan of Kremlin critics is tragically short. It was astonishing in many ways that Alexei Navalny had survived the attempt on his life. Remember, he was poisoned in 2020, allegedly, with Novichok nerve agent that had been sprayed onto his underpants, and his life was only saved because he managed to get to hospitals in Germany, in Berlin. And in fact, it was German authorities were very outspoken in identifying that type of poison. Of course, that's the same poison that we know Russian intelligence agents used in Salisbury in 2018 in an attempt to kill these Skripals. But Navalny, he was in Germany. He had a chance to stay in Germany, but he was insistent that he should go back to Russia. And he did that in 2021, in June 2021, some months after that poisoning. He was arrested the moment he touched down on Russian soil, and he's been in jail ever since. He was serving a 19-year prison sentence in an area called Yamala Nenets, in a really remote region, sort of central North Arctic Russia, thousands of miles from Moscow and thousands of miles from his wife, his friends, and his family. But nonetheless, that news, as you say, has sparked shockwaves and outrage and accusations around the world. I mean, at one end of the spectrum, we've had Latvia's president calling this a brutal murder by the Kremlin. We've heard President Zelensky of Ukraine saying Putin killed him. At the other end, there's just been sort of tributes to Navalny. Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak slightly more reserved, paying tribute to Navalny, but not actually apportioning blame. Whereas in Germany and France, in Germany, we've seen Chancellor Olaf Scholz, in France, their foreign minister, both saying that Navalny paid for his principles with his life. There's certainly no doubt that as a result of his political activism, as a result of daring to stand up to Vladimir Putin, Alexei Navalny exposed himself to enormous risk and hardship. We know that he was poisoned. We know that he's been jailed. He's been held in horrific conditions. Indeed, many, many days of his time in this penal colony have been in solitary confinement, in punishment cells. His health appeared to have been deteriorating. So in that sense, he's been jailed by the regime that Putin leads. He's been poisoned with a nerve agent, a military-grade nerve agent that is only really available to Putin's assassins. So, and that clearly will have had long-term health implications. So in that sense, clearly, the Russian regime, the Kremlin regime led by Vladimir Putin, is culpable for his death. It is not clear yet exactly what caused his death. So I should say, there's no doubt that the Kremlin regime led by Vladimir Putin is culpable to some extent because of what they've inflicted. The fact is, they tried to kill him in the past, but clearly we don't know at this stage precisely what killed him, and that has been the message, the defense coming out from Putin loyalists, accusing the West, accusing NATO of jumping on a bandwagon and accusing them of killing Navalny without any evidence. The timing of this is, of course, immensely significant as well. We're in the middle of February. In the middle of March, Russia will hold an election, effectively a rubber stamping election expected to extend Vladimir Putin's term in office. There's no credible opposition really expected to make any inroads. But that has triggered sort of two responses. I mean, some would say that actually the timing of Navalny's death will have a chilling effect on anyone who might dare speak out against Vladimir Putin, that it's the Kremlin sending a ruthless and brutal signal to anyone who might oppose Putin. And that certainly fits with a lot of Kremlinology, that fits with a lot of the way we know Vladimir Putin behaves. But equally, the Kremlin argument that's come out is that they say they didn't need to kill Navalny. They don't benefit from this. He was in prison. He'd been sidelined. The election was already on course, as I mentioned before, just be a rubber stamping exercise. And actually, what this will do, what this has already done, is provoke not only outrage around the world, but may also fire up Russian opposition inside Russia as well. Vladimir Putin surrounds himself by a huge amount of security. He appears to be, with good reason, perhaps paranoid for his safety. There are lots of people around the world, not least in Ukraine, who have both the means to some extent and certainly the desire to get rid of him. It's unlikely. Well, I can't say with any certainty that this will have an immediate impact on Vladimir Putin's security. I think it certainly is going to dominate conversations about Russia in the coming days and weeks. Of course, the Munich Security Forum, one of the largest international forums about global security, is beginning in Munich today. Clearly, Russia and its war in Ukraine likely to be high up on that agenda. The prospect for Vladimir Putin remaining in power remains one of the sort of central planks of Russia's foreign policy, because without Putin, who knows whether or not this bloodbath war in Ukraine would continue. Of course, the fear has always been that were Putin to leave office for whatever reason, through ill health, through accident, through assassination, or hard to imagine through a democratic transition, impossible to imagine really, the fear being that someone worse might come in, and in fact Russia's foreign policy might just continue to be even more aggressive. It's very hard to see a way from where we are today to a place in the near future where the Kremlin relaxes its attitude towards opposition. I mean, we've seen the way it has treated Navalny. We've seen the way opposition journalists have been murdered. We've seen the way opposition politicians have been murdered, gunned down in the past. And there remains uncertainty over, how directly the Kremlin has been in these murders, or whether or not it's been sort of reminiscent of those who might like to please Putin, trying to do his bidding and rid him, in that sense, of the troublesome priests, the people who are causing problems for him domestically. But certainly, if I were an opposition activist in Russia right now, I would remain very, very nervous.